So we're in your United States history book. We're in chapter 6, section 2, and we're going to be talking about the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Totally dissolved. The Declaration of Independence. This was a momentous resolution. Momentous revolution indeed. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee said the Congress appointed committees to take up this resolution, and it was led by Thomas Jefferson, who lived 1743 to 1826. It was the most important human statement of political principles in the history, probably the history of the entire world. On July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress unanimously adopted the Declaration of Independence. All the colonies. Here's a picture of those present at this time getting together to sign, and the signers, we the people, beginning with we the people, the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence openly recognized that God created all men, and that all men have a right to be treated with dignity as God's special creation. It said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from consent of the governed." So here we have a picture of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. You see John Hancock here, of course, his large signature, and all of these, as you know, are actually they're portraits of all these different people that signed. All these men that signed were signers of the Declaration of Independence. I wanted to say something, just a little tidbit here, when we were talking about Thomas Jefferson and the day that he died. Thomas Jefferson died, I think it was a 50-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Not only he died on that day, but also John Adams, who they were arch rivals at certain times, but they indeed were friends. They both died on the same day, on July 4th, the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. I just thought that was, and both of them being signers of the, of the Declaration, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Why America must be independent. They wrote 27 special grievances against the king, what had been done to them. Most important, that he forced laws on them, and they passed these laws by the Parliament. You see, the colonists never mentioned the Parliament at all by name in the Declaration because they believed the Parliament had no authority over them at all in the first place. They had basically had no role in the charter. See, the charters were given to the colonists by the king himself. And so they were subject to the king, they felt, but not to the Parliament, the Parliament was actually making laws for them and basically putting taxes on them and all these things. So they did not recognize that basically we do not recognize legally the Parliament has any hold on us. And so the Americans, they believed, should enjoy the same rights as British citizens, which they didn't. So they said, we have the same rights as the citizens of England in England, but now those rights are been taken away. And so they believed the King, George III, had proved himself a tyrant, unfit to rule this free people of the United States. And America now had no choice but to succeed from Great Britain. The words of the Declaration basically saying, We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world. Who's the supreme judge of the world? God, right? They do in the name and authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. And for support of this declaration, with firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, right, God, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I love that. We pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor on this Declaration of Independence. America now has set the example of liberty in the world. The foundation of independence was already in the hearts and minds of the people of America long before the war began. That's what John Adams said. America was destined to set an example of liberty worldwide. Yes, the world was looking on America. What was going to happen next? The English precedent. Basically, the English precedent was in their hearts and mind because they mostly were English in heritage. And they had the heritage of freedom that many Englishmen knew in their hearts in England. Many in England had been very biblical. Many of them had read the Bible. So the American inherited their love of liberty from the English people. The political and religious freedom that they had was that drove them to America. They believed in religious freedom and political freedom and economic freedom in America. That's why they had come here, and now their freedoms were being taken away. Edmund Burke, the Irishman in the Parliament that supported America, said, Americans were simply putting English theory into practical terms. The people of the colonies are descendants of Englishmen, he said. They are devoted to liberty, but to liberty according to English ideas and on English principles. He basically said, hey, Americans know freedom from being English. They had the influence of a couple men here, a couple from that brought forth the theories that they took from not only from the Bible, but from two other. And one of them was a Christian, and one of them I'm not sure was, but John Locke was one. In 1632 to 1704, John Locke had the social theory of government, basically saying government derives its authority from consent of the governed rather than the king. Basically saying the consent should be from the people, not the king, so that people possess the rights to life, liberty, and property. So he wrote 2 treaties of government, and George III had broken the contract by refusing to protect their colonies. So the Prohibitory Act had expelled them from the empire, and now America had already become independent. So basically, taking from Locke, deriving his theory, not theory, I guess you would say social theory, that government derives its authority from the governed, from the people, not the king. I'm not sure John Locke was a Christian, but William of Blackstone was. He was another one that the Americans looked up to, and he wrote the Commentaries on the Laws of England from 1765 to 1769, and he wrote 4 volumes of books. So he's best known for English law. He lived 1723 to 1780, so he was still alive at this time, but he was elderly. He gave the colonists definite law of nature, not reason, but the law of nature would being the will of God. So he looked to the will of God and to the Bible. He said it's man's responsibility to comply with these laws in relation to mankind and to his fellow man. He looked and examined Adam and Eve, their fall, and that was caused man's reason not to be sufficient for establishing laws to govern mankind. That only Scripture are which such laws should be revealed. So basically what he was saying is that you don't trust man alone, humanism, because basically the law should be based on Scripture and based on what God would have rather than every man for his own thoughts. So basically saying Adam's fall has caused man to be sin and have a sinful nature. So anyone governing without God will have a sinful nature, and that laws need to be subject to the Scripture or to the Bible, the biblical law in the Bible. So that's William Blackstone. There were patriots in America, and there were also loyalists. Well, the patriots, of course, they wanted independence from Great Britain, and they knew. But not all Americans favored a split with England. Some of them thought, yes, we need to stand up for our rights, but we don't know if we really want to split and go totally independent. In fact, at this time, as the Declaration came, about 1/3 favored independence, and they were called patriots, and about 1/3 opposed independence. They were called loyalists, meaning they're loyal to Great Britain, and about 1/3 were undecided. But we are going to find, as time went on, many of these loyalists, when they were attacked and they were mistreated and their families were mistreated, they turned towards being patriots. And if you've ever seen, especially the movie The Patriot, that's what happened with him. So anyway, we see a turn later on. But in the beginning, they were like iffy, like, we don't know. So not everyone supported the Declaration of Independence right in the beginning. In fact, the Whigs, they were called Whigs, were patriots who opposed the monarchy or governed by the kings and queens. They were called the Whigs. So we have the patriots and the loyalists. The Whigs were patriots, and then we have some that weren't really sure what they supported at that time, whether they were patriots or loyalists. They looked on to see what was going to happen next. Okay, let's go on to our next section.